Slaughter in English law on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
So follow me and we will go into...
The British justice system is the envy of the world. But in the past, mistakes have been made.
Over the last 150 years, approximately 1,500 people have been hanged in the United Kingdom. Many of those desperately protested their innocence.
Some of these long-standing convictions could be a miscarriage of justice.
The evidence is so overwhelming that they have to tell the truth.
In this series, a living relative will attempt to clear their family name.
It was a long, long time ago, but mud sticks. Mud does stick.
Searching for new evidence.
The co-defendant has quite significant blood staining on his clothing.
With help from two of the UK's leading barristers, one for the defence.
There is a world of difference between an unpleasant journey and murder.
And one for the prosecution.
He cut off her head, dismembered her, and buried her in a place where he hoped she would never be found.
They're on a mission to solve a mystery, submitting their findings to a Crown Court judge.
Your Honour ought to declare the conviction for murder to be unsafe.
Thank you both for your submissions. I shall consider these matters for myself.
Can this modern investigation rewrite history? On a Sunday in August 1952, in a remote part of Lanarkshire, Scotland, two men stopped by to check on pensioner and hermit Michael Connolly, known affectionately as Old Mick. Inside his tiny ramshackle hut, they found his dead body, beaten and bloody. He'd been viciously attacked with an iron bar, a brick and a broken bottle. Police quickly launched a murder investigation and picked up important clues, including a blood-stained discarded coat and a boot print. Suspicion fell on two farm labourers living in the area, 25-year-old Irish-born George Francis Shaw and his roommate, George Dunn. They were charged with murder and stood trial at Scotland's High Court in Glasgow, both pleading their innocence. Dunn was found guilty of culpable homicide, roughly equivalent to manslaughter in English law, on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But George Shaw was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. On the 26th of January 1953 at Glasgow's Barlinnie prison, George Francis Shaw was hanged. Now, nearly 70 years on, George Francis Shaw's nieces, sisters Evelyn and Catherine, question the safety of their uncle's conviction.
George Shaw was my dad's big brother, and we knew him as Uncle Frank.
Well, these are some of the photos that we have of Uncle Frank. I don't know how old he is there, but he's a handsome-looking man.
He is.
Frank Shaw was executed before the sisters were born, and they learnt about the case through their father.
My dad was 17 when Frank was executed, and I think it did have quite a big impact on my dad. And I remember my dad always saying that it killed my granny.
It broke her heart.
The family have long held the view that Frank Shaw was wrongfully convicted.
My dad said he was definitely innocent, and he always believed he was innocent. And the whole family did.
Yeah.
All his brothers and sisters. He said he was a caring man, jovial man. He was known as a gentle giant. Dad would be, I think, really proud of us for doing this.
I think so.
To try and clear my Uncle Frank's name.
If possible.
Yeah, it would be so nice.
At the end of the day, it's a stigma with the family. I know it was a long, long time ago, but mud sticks. Mud does stick.
George Francis Shaw claimed he had an alibi for the alleged date of Michael Connolly's murder, and the evidence against him was circumstantial. But was it a miscarriage of justice? And can a modern-day legal team shed any fresh light on this 1950s conviction? Examining the case for the defence is Jeremy Dean QC, who's defended clients in high-profile trials. And for the prosecution is Sasha Was QC, who was made Criminal Silk of the Year in 2015. Catherine and Evelyn have come to London to meet the barristers.
Catherine.
Hi.
Hello. Lovely
there.
to meet you, Evelyn. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Can I ask each of you when you first learnt about Frank Shaw's case? Catherine?
I found out when I was about 8. Just eating and listening to a conversation with my dad's brothers in the house.
Okie dokie. And what about you, Evelyn?
I was about 12, my mum told me. Didn't quite understand it at the time. When I was about 14, 15, when I asked my dad.
Yes. And did he give you an honest answer?
He did.
Right.
He did. He told me that he had a brother who was tried and executed for murder.
Did he express anger or emotion? What was his demeanour?
He never really spoke about it unless you asked him questions. Because he was sad about it.
There are some cases in which, in an inquiry of this nature, it becomes apparent that the evidence is in fact stronger than it was initially thought to be. If that was to transpire, how would you feel about it?
So we just need to accept it. It's going to be bittersweet either way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really.
Well, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to
and
meet you. Thank you.
hopefully we'll have some news for you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very
Good
much.
to meet you both.
Thank you.
George Francis Shaw was born in 1927 in County Mayo, Ireland. Aged 15, he moved to Scotland, where he worked mainly with potato squads and as a farm labourer. He spent 2 years in the army, but was discharged for misconduct. He also fathered children with his girlfriend. Shaw lived a hard and unsettled life, but was he capable of murder? The barristers are starting their investigation by examining the facts of the case.
Michael Connolly, known locally as Old Mick, was last seen alive on Sunday the 17th of August, 1952, when a witness saw him talking to a man in what was described as a battle dress shirt. The following Sunday, on the 24th of August, Connolly's body was discovered in his hut, and it appeared that he'd been brutally attacked. Now, police suspected that Connolly had been killed in the course of a robbery. George Dunn quickly became police suspect, and in the course of questioning, Dunn implicated George Francis Shaw, known as Frank. Now, during the course of their investigation, police discovered that Shaw had been spending money freely on Sunday, the 17th of August, which seemed suspicious. And most strangely of all, when they were arrested, Shaw and Dunn were both wearing socks that were later identified as belonging to Old Mick. Now, Frank Shaw's trial began on the 2nd of December, and he presented a special defence of alibi. However, this was not believed by the jury, and they found Shaw guilty of murder by a majority of 11-3. Well, Sasha, what do you think?
Well, Jeremy, it seems to me that this is a case which involves some quite interesting scientific evidence. And I would like to enlist the services of a forensic scientist to see what he or she can tell us about the crime scene.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I think it would also be a good idea to put the spotlight on George Dunn, Shaw's co-defendant, who was found guilty of culpable homicide on the grounds of diminished responsibility. And I feel that speaking to a modern-day psychiatrist to reveal more about his state of mind would be useful. We've got a lot to do.
We have.
Michael Connolly, known affectionately to Lanark locals as Old Mick, was born around 1872. For 15 years before his death, he'd survived mainly off a small pension and was generally considered to be impoverished. He spent his summers living a hermit-type existence in a tiny makeshift hut on a farm on the outskirts of Lanark. A number of local residents befriended him, bringing him gifts of food and clothing. For a man living a reclusive life with no known enemies, why was he the target of a brutal attack? Evelyn and Catherine have come to Lanark Golf Club, which overlooks the farm where Michael Connolly's hut was situated. They want to get a better understanding of the events surrounding the discovery of his body.
So here's the golf course. This is where we are. The farm, I think it's just over down there. So we've actually got a picture of the hut here, and look how tiny it is. It's really small.
Look at the conditions. An old man of 80-year-old living in a shack like that. Just unbelievable. Not even enough room to stand up in it.
No. Man tells of how he found body of recluse during a Sunday walk. And it was a labourer on the 24th of August was out for a walk on this actual golf course when he met up with a man. They both knew Connolly very well and decided to visit him. When they reached the hut, they saw Connolly's body lying on the bed. They closed the hut and went to the police station. The police found he had many injuries, including a fracture of the skull and laceration of the brain. He had been dead for some time. So for to have the injuries, that would have been a very, very brutal attack.
Violent, very violent.
Despite his general poverty, a witness claimed Michael Connolly had told him he'd been saving to eventually pay for his funeral. When police searched his hut after his death, there was no money to be found, so they suspected he'd been robbed.
They say that Dunn and Shaw attacked him, took his money.
Sad,
Yeah,
really
she was
sad.
sad.
His life been taken so tragic like that.
Mm-hmm.
Murdered
For his money,
for his money.
basically.
George Dunn was the first to come under particular suspicion for Michael Connolly's murder when a blood-stained battle dress shirt was handed to police, which Dunn himself had deposited in the parcels office at Lanark bus station. A witness had seen Connolly talking to a man in a battle dress shirt on the 17th of August, the last time he was seen alive. Under questioning, Dunn then confessed to having been present for the assault on Connolly, but said his roommate Frank Shaw had carried out the attack. Police subsequently discovered that on the 17th of August, Frank Shaw had been seen with what seemed to be lots of money, despite being unemployed. Was old Mick killed for his money? The barristers are examining Shaw's spending behaviour on the 17th of August.
Well, Jeremy, this is a map of Lanark. We know that old Mick lived in his hut, really some way out of the town, round about here. Now, on the 17th, Frank Shaw was seen at the Clyde Valley Hotel here. He bought 2 rounds of drinks for his friends, and on that same day, he provided £2 in maintenance to his partner. So, Jeremy, at trial, the prosecution put the motive for this murder as robbery, and the arguments that were put forward was that on the Sunday, which was the last day that old Mick was seen alive, Frank Shaw suddenly came into money. He could flash some money around, and that was how they put it.
Evelyn and Catherine want to learn more about the money their uncle was said to have spent on the 17th of August. They've come to Glasgow to look at reports of witness testimony from his trial.
Court told of 16 whiskies. A week before, old Mick Connolly was found dead in the hut home near Lanark last August. One of the 2 men accused of murdering him stood friends 16 whiskies.
That means bought. He bought six.
It said he had a roll of notes with him. A 20-year-old railway worker said, I saw he had money. I would say he had about £10.
Right, this is another article, also in this day as well, on the 17th. Hut murder charged man had notes. A coach painter received £2 for Frank to give to his sister for the children, and his sister was Frank's girlfriend.
Yeah.
She was asked by the advocate in court about it, were you surprised to receive this £2? And her reply was yes, with him being out of work.
So it looks a bit suspicious, doesn't it?
It does look a bit suspicious, but at the end of the day, was he a saver?
Was George Shaw's apparent wealth on the 17th of August really as incriminating as it first appeared?
Sasha, the reality of the situation is that Frank Shaw had money. The motive alleged by the prosecution doesn't work. He'd been working in potato squads up until the 9th of August. When he left that employment, he had about £5, 10 shillings, plus £2 held by his employer as a security. He began work with a cable company on the 19th of August. So on the 17th of August, 1952, Frank Shaw had been unemployed for a period of 8 days, but he had work lined up. And the proposition that he robbed and killed old Mick for money is simply not sustainable.
And what we've got to bear in mind is that the evidence that old Mick actually had money really comes down to the word of one witness who said that old Mick was in effect boasting one day that he had saved his pension so that he could have a decent funeral. So, Jeremy, the position is we have very tenuous evidence that old Mick actually had an appreciable sum of money, and we have very tenuous evidence that Frank Shaw came into an unusual amount of money.
Well, Sasha, I think that's a very fair standpoint and accords with the evidence, and we're going to have to consider, in those circumstances, the extent to which the motive aspect of the case features in our submissions to the judge.
With a financial motive proving hard to substantiate, Evelyn and Catherine are growing increasingly convinced of the deficiencies in the case against their uncle.
Did old Mick definitely die on the 17th? Nobody knows. Frank was spending money on the 17th, so they're only assuming that he was murdered on the 17th. Old Mick wasn't found to the 24th, so he could have been murdered on the 20th.
Yeah, it could have been a different day.
It could have been any day.
So if it wasn't the 17th that old Mick died, do they really have a case against your Uncle Frank?
I wouldn't imagine so.
No.
I wouldn't imagine so.
The prosecution alleged there was further evidence against Frank Shaw. This included 2 items discovered at the crime scene: a footprint said to match his boot, and a blood-stained blue coat. 2 witnesses at trial said they had seen Frank Shaw wearing such a coat, although he denied it was his. Can modern-day crime scene analysis shed any fresh light on whether Shaw was involved in Michael Connolly's murder? The barristers are meeting forensic scientist Sophie Park from London's South Bank University.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Sophie.
Hello. Sophie, we have here a reconstruction of Michael Connolly's hut. Now, this is where his body was found. It's a tiny premises. It was 7'6" long, 5'6" wide, and 3 foot tall. Having looked at the evidence of the crime scene, are you able to say whether he was actually attacked in the hut?
Yes, at least part of the attack. There's a large volume of blood within the hut.
Yes.
There is blood spattered around the walls and the bed and the bedpost.
And what does that tell you?
That would indicate that there has been airborne blood.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything which is indicative of there having been 1 as opposed to 2 assailants?
Not that I'm aware of from the information that I've received.
We know that very near the hut there was a blue coat which was heavily bloodstained.
Yes.
What tests were done to ascertain the provenance of that blood in 1952?
So at the time they used blood grouping.
Blood grouping, yes. So that's A, B, O.
Exactly. And they found that it was human blood and that the blood came from somebody who was an O blood type.
And what blood type was old Mick?
My understanding is that he was also type O.
Right.
And in relation to the jacket, Shaw denied that it was his.
Yes.
Are you aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware of that. And there's nothing scientifically linking him to the jacket.
The other part of the evidence which was significant in this case was a footprint found near to the hut, said to be the footprint of the defendant Frank Shaw. Now, how accurate is analysis of footprints?
Footwear mark evidence can be very strong evidence.
Yes.
In fact, it can be conclusive evidence.
Have you seen anything in the case papers to suggest that this was not a reliable comparison in this case?
The information about the footwear mark is limited.
Right, right.
It just says that it could have been made by the shoe
Right.
of Mr. Shaw.
The reality in this case is that the forensic evidence doesn't really help to determine, first, how many men were involved in the attack, and second, which of the 2 or both were involved, does it?
Well, the co-defendant has quite significant blood staining on his clothing. And some of that blood staining is in the form of spots, airborne blood. And the only thing linking Mr. Shaw would be the jacket, which is blood-stained, but we can't directly link him to the jacket itself.
And the footprints.
And the footwear mark. But he does give a reasonable explanation why his footwear mark might be present there, as he said that he often wanders around this area.
Yeah.
Well, that's been really helpful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Frank Shaw was an Irish Catholic who, in the 1940s, emigrated to Scotland, a predominantly Protestant country. Large numbers of Irish Catholic immigrants had been coming to Scotland since the mid-19th century and had often faced discrimination and hostility on account of their religion. So could anti-Irish attitudes have influenced the case against Frank Shaw? Evelyn and Catherine are meeting with social historian Dr. Joe Bradley at St Columkille's Catholic Church in Glasgow.
Hi, Joe. I'm Catherine. Pleased to meet you.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, I'm Evelyn, pleased to meet you.
Hi, Evelyn.
Joe, could you tell us a little bit about the Irish immigration in the 40s when Uncle Frank came over from Ireland?
Ireland was suffering greatly in terms of poverty. In Scotland, there was a bit of an economic surge in terms of coals and steel and iron. So work was, relatively speaking, a plenty compared to Ireland.
What would my Uncle Frank's life been like, being an Irish immigrant coming here to work?
Well, his life would have been harsh. He was relatively uneducated, unskilled, so he worked at the bottom of the employment ladder. They would take whatever they would get, farm hands, farm labourers. The conditions were very harsh and the wages were really poor.
So what was the attitude towards the Irish people from the Scottish people?
Largely, it was negative. In the 1930s, there was riots in Edinburgh against Catholics. Even the Church of Scotland in the 20s had a famous report talking about the menace of the Irish race to Scotland, and it's a very famous report that the Church of Scotland actually, just a number of years ago, apologised for. So that gives you an idea, a feel for the climate in Scotland at that particular period in relation to Catholics of Irish descent.
So would Uncle Frank, because he was Irish, been more of a suspect?
I think you could probably say that's true, particularly at that time. You know, if you have an Irish accent, if you have an Irish and a Catholic name, if you're relatively speaking uneducated, if you're a member of the working class, none of those things are going to advantage you. And I think in certain circumstances, they may very well disadvantage you.
That's quite sad.
A key piece of evidence against Frank Shaw and George Dunn was that when they were arrested, they were both wearing pairs of socks that were identified as belonging to old Mick Connolly. But could a pair of socks really implicate Frank Shaw in murder? The barristers are examining this part of the evidence.
The two people that the police had arrested for the murder of this man both appeared to be wearing the dead man's socks, which is an unfortunate state of affairs.
I mean, clearly, 2 pairs of socks were stolen, but there's nothing to refute what Frank Shaw said Dunn had done, which was to give him a pair of socks. Whether one was stolen by Shaw, one was stolen by Dunn, or 2 were stolen by Shaw, or 2 were stolen by Dunn, we'll never know. The critical question here is who was involved in the killing of old Mick, not who was wearing whose socks.
Well, of course, I understand that, but the position is that these socks connected Shaw with Connolly.
Is this a direct connection because he was present and or involved, or did he get the socks from Dunn? Certainly Frank Shaw maintained that Dunn had given him that pair of socks.
But he gave that evidence in front of the jury, and the jury must have disbelieved him.
The trial of George Francis Shaw and George Dunn began at Scotland's High Court of Justiciary on the 2nd of December 1952 and lasted for 7 days. Both men pleaded not guilty. Shaw's defence was that he had an alibi for the alleged date of the murder, although there were key periods on that day when his whereabouts could not be corroborated by witnesses. The only evidence led on behalf of Dunn was that he had cognitive impairment. His mental capacity was therefore explored in detail at the trial. But did that reveal anything of consequence for Frank Shaw? Evelyn and Catherine have come to a local library to explore some of the press coverage from the trial.
Old Mick murder trial enters 4th day. So Dunn wept in the dock yesterday when a doctor said he was feeble-minded with a mental age of just around 8 and did not know the meaning of the word murder. During his time in prison, he had sometimes banged on the cell door for no apparent reason and at times had been surly and most aggressive. So Dunn, he said it was our Uncle Frank. that murdered old Mick. But reading this, it looks like he was quite an angry person. And your Uncle Frank, he was just so different, joyful.
What we've heard of him, gentle giant.
After Lord Carmont had donned the black cap and pronounced the death sentence, Shaw bowed to his lordship and immediately turned. Showing no signs of emotion, and was led down the stairs from the court by police officers. It's really sad, isn't it?
Was he maybe taken aback that he never showed
Maybe
any...
shocked.
He never showed any emotion or...
I don't know why. You would think he would, like, break down or something.
I would have broke down.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you leave home at 14, 15-year-old, you have to face the world. And is this why...
He kept his emotions.
Yep.
Never showed his emotions.
It's a tough world.
George Dunn's original statement to police implicating Shaw was not permitted as evidence in court, nor did he give evidence at the trial in person. But should he have even been tried in the first place? The barristers are meeting with consultant forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Shaham Das.
Well, Dr. Das, thank you very much for coming to help us with the case. What I'd like to ask you about is the role of George Dunn. Now, George Dunn was a man in his early 20s, but he was assessed as having a mental age of 8. Now, how would that translate in terms of learning difficulties?
I also read in the documentation that he had an IQ of 57.
Right.
So to me, that would indicate that he has a learning disability, a very low level of overall functioning and independence.
Could someone with a low IQ be more inclined not to tell the truth merely because they have a low IQ?
I don't think that having a low IQ in itself would make somebody want to not tell the truth, but they would not be able to judge a social situation or judge the consequences of telling the truth. Somebody with such a low IQ could be quite easily misled or could be pressurised into saying something. And I think somebody like yourself or myself might know that the evidence is so overwhelming that they have to tell the truth, whereas somebody with a low IQ might not recognise that to the same degree.
What about the temptation to protect one's own interests at the expense of someone else?
So my answer to that would be no. I don't think they're more likely to do it, but they're less capable when they try to do it.
They're not such good liars if they decide to lie.
Exactly. As an 8-year-old would be.
As an 8-year-old wouldn't be.
In one of the reports that was drafted in 1952, it stated George Dunn knew what he was charged with, that he understood the meaning of the term not guilty, but because of his lack of intelligence, his grasp of the whole situation was very imperfect, and that he didn't have the concentration and the acuity of mind which would enable him to follow and understand clearly the process. In modern terms, that means he wasn't fit to plead, doesn't it?
I absolutely agree, and I have read in some of the documentations that some of the doctors that assessed him found him fit to plead.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake. I think that, as you outlined yourself, the evidence suggests that although superficially he might have been able to say guilty or not guilty, and maybe have a very basic understanding of what that meant, I don't think he'd be able to understand the deeper concepts behind it. And as you say, I don't think he'd understand the court process, so I think he's unfit to plead.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
Frank Shaw's legal team appealed his conviction, but their efforts were in vain, and he awaited his execution date in the condemned cell at Glasgow's Barlinnie jail. Evelyn and Catherine want to learn more about his final hours, so they've come to the jail to meet with first-line manager, William McGurk. He's brought them to a wing that looks nearly identical to where their uncle was held.
The death cell were the last 3 cells on the second flat. On the morning of the execution, about 8 o'clock, any people would like to meet, whether it was a priest or the chaplain, everything was said in the death cell. What they would do then, he would walk round, short way to the gallery, into the execution chamber. He would step onto the trap door that would be marked with footprints where he should stand. The hood and the noose would go on at the one time and the lever would be pulled. From the death cell to the trapdoor opening would be 30 seconds. That was how quick it happened.
Yep.
Really quick.
This is Frank's last day. It's written by prison staff. It actually says here at 8:01 the prisoner was escorted to the scaffold. Prisoner was very calm. And when he was escorted to the gallows, he said to the staff, "I'm as innocent as anyone."
Still pleading his innocence till the end, even walking to the gallows.
Reading all this, he was a very model prisoner, you know, and at the end, when he was speaking to the staff at the end, it did seem very sincere.
Hearing his last words, "I'm as innocent as anyone," was just so sad. If he had done it, he would have confessed then, I'm sure.
With the judgment fast approaching, Jeremy has come across a fascinating letter written to the Secretary of State for Scotland by the chaplain at Barlinnie Prison, sent after Frank Shaw's appeal was dismissed. It expresses views questioning his guilt. Could this be the evidence Jeremy needs to cast Frank Shaw's conviction in an entirely new light?
Secretary of the Prison chaplain said officers who were in charge of him, that's Shaw, all agreed that his conduct and bearing have been beyond reproach. And with myself, they cannot understand how anyone of his docile, frank and pleasant nature could be guilty of murder. Quite the opposite opinion is held in regard to the other prisoner who was charged with Shaw, for on many occasions during his stay in prison he has displayed violent tendencies. Prisoners who were companions of Shaw and Dunn have approached me, the chaplain, voluntarily before and after conviction and have stated that Dunn was putting it on Shaw. One prisoner volunteered the information that Dunn had confided to him that he had worn Shaw's boots and was not going to take the rap. The prisoner is willing to swear to the truth of his statement in any court of law. That's a pretty striking analysis by the chaplain, don't you think?
I'm slightly cynical, Jeremy, about people who are so persuasive once they enter the prison system. Shaw would have every interest to try and present a picture of somebody who has been wrongfully convicted. I'm not saying it's necessarily untrue, but the jury were presented with a picture of two men committing this robbery, two men engaged in the killing, and if one of them was more violent than the other, that is not necessarily surprising.
I take your point. I just think it gives us some insight to the respective personalities of these two individuals.
After Frank Shaw's execution, his body was buried in the grounds of Barlinnie Prison. His grave is unmarked. However, its location is recorded in prison documents, and Evelyn and Catherine have come to that spot to pay their respects.
So this seems to be the spot where her Uncle Frank was last laid to rest. This is a letter that Uncle Frank wrote to his brother John 2 days before his execution. Dear brother, just a short note to let you know that I am in the best of health, as I hope this letter will leave you the same way. I want you to promise me that you will write home to Mother and let her know that I am not afraid to die, as I have done no murder, and tell her not to worry too much about me. Just pray I am sure I will be happy in the next world. But I will watch my children every night to see that nothing will happen to them. From George Francis Shaw. It's really sad.
Uncle Frank's lying here, as he should be, and beside his mum.
That's right. He should be.
Stood lying in there. Unmarked grave.
You always said you were innocent, Uncle Frank, so we're here to try and prove that you were.
The barristers have completed their investigation and must now present their findings to Judge David Radford.
The evidence against Frank Shaw was circumstantial. There are various strands. The question the judge is going to have to decide is whether they are strong enough to have mounted a case of murder against him.
The evidence was circumstantial, but there are significant arguments it wasn't sufficient to justify conviction, and I'll do my very best to convince the judge that the conviction is unsafe.
For Evelyn and Catherine, today could finally be the chance to clear their uncle's name, nearly 70 years after he was hanged for murder.
An unsafe verdict would mean a lot to us as a family. It would mean that what we were always told, that he was innocent.
Evelyn, hello. Nice to see you again. Catherine.
Good to see you again.
Now, today is Judgment Day. What are your feelings? Are you hopeful?
Yes.
Yes?
And nervous.
And nervous.
Clearly, it's very emotional material. There's no question about it. Yeah.
I think we're being called on, so follow me and we will go into the judge's room, all right?
With over 14 years' experience as a senior Crown Court judge, David Radford has presided over some of the UK's most infamous trials.
Please take a seat.
And he'll be treating this case like any other.
We are here today for me to consider the safety of the conviction of George Francis Shaw for the murder of Michael Connolly. Mr. Dean, would you like to make submissions to me?
It's my submission that the evidence was insufficient to justify a verdict of guilty of murder. It relied first on a blue coat spattered with human blood, and witnesses spoke to having seen Mr. Shaw with this coat, whereas other witnesses said they'd never seen him with such a coat. Now, tests carried out on the bloodstains found on that coat showed the group to be O. The victim was also found to be in Group O. But Group O is the most frequent grouping, accounting for about 46% of the population. A key feature of the prosecution case were boot impressions found near the hut, and evidence was given that a mark corresponded with marks on the boots alleged to have been worn by Shaw. But when he gave evidence, Mr. Shaw fully explained this by saying that he often went for walks in the vicinity of where the impressions were found. And I should say in the background was the suggestion that on the evening of the killing, Mr. Shaw had spent more money than should be expected of him. But when he gave evidence, he outlined in detail various sources of income which undermined any suggestion that he'd committed this brutal killing for financial gain. Now, Frank Shaw was tried alongside the co-defendant, who was unfit to be tried. That proposition is supported by a modern-day expert, Dr. Das, who told us that in his view the co-defendant was unfit to plead. I submit it was highly prejudicial to Mr. Shaw for the co-defendant to be tried alongside him. The jury would have seen him, they might well have sympathised with him. The atmosphere of the case was such that Mr. Shaw was far more likely to be convicted alongside him. Finally, correspondence from the prison chaplain, which emerged shortly before Frank Shaw was executed, described how Mr. Shaw had maintained his complete innocence. Officers in charge of Mr. Shaw had observed that his conduct was, quote, beyond reproach. They could not understand how anyone of his docile, frank and pleasant nature could be guilty of murder. And that Your Honour should take the view, having regard to what's emerged in the course of this inquiry, that Frank Shaw's conviction is unsafe.
Thank you very much.
Those are my submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Ms. Wass, your response.
As far as the joint trial was concerned, the co-accused himself did not give evidence, and the jury were never made aware of any of the things that the co-accused said about Frank Shaw's involvement. The jury, therefore, were simply left with the circumstantial evidence in this case, and I can itemise it. When Frank Shaw was arrested, he was wearing socks that belonged to the deceased. Two witnesses identified the blood-spattered coat found so near to the hut where the slaughtered body of Michael Connolly was found as being one that was worn by Frank Shaw. The footprint matched one of Frank Shaw's shoes, and he explained it by saying that he had walked in that area previously. Mr. Shaw denied ever even seeing Connolly's hut, and given the fact that it was only 250 feet from the place where he was walking, that it might have been considered by the jury to be an unlikely explanation. I accept what Mr. Dean has said about Shaw's spending, but there is a huge difference between saying there was no unexplained wealth in this case and saying that there was no motive that was financial. Mr. Connolly told other people that he was squirreling away his pension, and if that information was known to Mr. Shaw, that would have been a motive for committing a robbery. It is not the function of this investigation to usurp the part played by the jury in the trial process. And on the basis that there was a case to answer, it is with regret that I submit that it would not be appropriate for this jury verdict to be overturned.
Thank you, Ms. Voss. I'm grateful to both of you. I shall take time now to reflect further upon this case, if you're kind enough to leave me to do that.
How are you feeling about things?
I do feel positive. Hopefully he listens to...
Yeah, well, so do I. Yeah, so do I. I mean, whether he is prepared to substitute his own view for the jury's, we'll just have to wait and see.
The judge may interfere with this because Jeremy has put forward some very powerful arguments. But if he doesn't, it's simply because we've got to have faith in a jury system.
Did George Francis Shaw rob and brutally murder Michael Connolly in 1952? Or was he the victim of an unfortunate chain of coincidental evidence and subjected to an unfair trial? The judge is now ready to deliver his verdict.
Mr. Dean submits the co-accused should have been found unfit to be tried. Mr. Dean's submission, indeed, has some force. In any event, I'm not asked to review the safety of the co-accused's conviction for culpable homicide, but of Mr. Shaw's for murder. The real question in Mr. Shaw's case for the jury to determine was whether the various independent links of the circumstantial evidence, the coat, the socks, the footprint, the money, were purely unhappy coincidences, or alternatively, cogent evidence put together of the guilt of Mr. Shaw. In answer, Mr. Shaw gave evidence. The trial jury heard and saw him. They weighed his explanations. The fact that the co-accused was in the same trial did not seem to me to affect the safety of Mr. Shaw's conviction. The co-accused did not give evidence. His counsel did not cross-examine Mr. Shaw. The co-accused's original answers to the police's questions were not adduced before the jury. I'm afraid that the pre-execution opinions of those at the prison does not begin to constitute admissible and cogent new evidence. I have not found any proper basis for concluding that the jury's verdicts should be regarded as unsafe. I shall rise.
Well, you've heard the judge's ruling, his decision. I'm very disappointed by it, but how do you feel about it?
Disappointed, yes.
Yeah. I'm sure you share that feeling.
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Okay, all the very best.
Very nice to meet you.
I still believe that he was a gentleman, kind-hearted, and I don't think he'd done it.
I still think our uncle was innocent.
You really, seriously are throwing these away?
How do you make money for nothing?
It's really heavy. This is like solid brass.
The answer could be hiding in the 30 million tonnes of household waste we throw out every year.
I was only going to throw them away, so...
Don't look surprised.
So you can keep them.
That's why reclamation expert Jay Blades wants to get his hands on things before they hit the skip.
I've been a builder, I've been a philosophy student, and now I'm a furniture restorer. So I know more than most about transformation. I take the old and revamp it into the new and sell it on for a profit.
And with some of the country's elite designers and makers...
Unstable, to say the least. I see you found the broken lid.
He can transform his finds into desirable...
You've got to get one of those.
Thank you.
Valuable...
This is perfect as it is.
And hopefully saleable items.
These are nice, aren't they?
Do you recognise them?
If Jay's successful, then he can hand the profits back to the very people who had no idea there was cash to be made from their trash.
Wonderful.
At the Altrincham Recycling Centre just outside Manchester. It's all hands on deck to ditch the debris. And master of the makeover, Jay Blades,
How you doing, mate? You all right?
is on a mission.
When it comes to finding gems amongst the junk, I'm not fussy, but I am greedy. I want tables, lighting, sofas, you name it, I want the lot. I'm not leaving here until the van is full.
Jay's got an insatiable appetite for tossed out treasures.
What you got in there then?
But he's not looking for any old rubbish. Jay's on the lookout for 4 items that he can pluck from the public, rework and sell on for a profit.
What is that?
It was a model railway.
But before you train your sights on the skips, just remember Jay's got special permission to do as he does. Peter and Sybil have arrived. Will their skip-bound spoils be worth the scavenge?
Hello, guys. How you doing? I'm Jay.
Hello, Jay.
Sybil.
Wow. You must have something in there for me.
Yeah, we've got some very old steps here which belong to Sib's mum.
These are proper nice. So how long have you guys had these?
We've had those for over 40 years. Sybil's mother's had those for about 50 years.
And then this one, what's the story behind that? That's a big one.
They were Sybil's fathers, and they must be something in the region of about 70 years old as well.
Yes, they must be.
So these belong to your dad then?
Yes, they do.
Oh. And then, what, you don't want to keep them, or you just throwing them away?
No, I'm happy for you to have them if you want them.
Oh, I do want them, actually.
Right, OK.
I was going to ask you that. Can I have them?
Yes, of course you can.
And if I'm able to do something with them,
OK.
I'll keep you posted and let you know.
Thank you. All right, Jay.
All right, let's take that little baby first.
Jay's bagged some rather old and rickety step ladders. Any ideas of what they could become, Peter?
No idea at all. But I don't think he's going to take it home and use them. I think he has seemed to have more of an artistic flair about him.
Now, I love wooden ladders. They're not very practical because they're unsafe, and hence why so many people are thrown away. But there's loads of material here, and the ideas, I think, are endless. Just you wait and see.
So, who does Jay have in mind to step up to the challenge? Dynamic design duo Josh and Ollie. This pair of bespoke furniture makers work wonders with wood. And whatever skip-bound cast-offs come their way. If it's tired, they're hired.
Working with salvage pieces can be difficult a lot of the time, but I think what always kind of draws us to it is the fact that they're so interesting in terms of the materials that we've got to work with.
Getting these salvaged items, they force us into coming up with ideas that we would never come up with ordinarily. Like normally we work from scratch, so we have an idea and then we make it, whereas this is quite good. It really forces you to come up with something interesting.
Jay's brought along the lacklustre ladders to see if Josh and Ollie can give them some TLC. That's tender ladder care.
Jay's on his way over. He's almost here. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what he's got for us. He normally brings us some pretty good stuff, so yeah, looking forward to it.
Now, I've got these ladders, and they need some creative ideas. Josh and Ollie are just the team to help me out on this one. Oh, I've got you a lovely gift here. How are we doing?
Cool.
You all right? So what do you think?
Very nice.
They are, aren't they? They have seen better days, but I thought they were really cool. Yeah. And I said, you know what? I've got to bring them with you guys because they need some creativity. And the only idea that I had was to kind of turn them into shelves.
What about if we were to, I mean, similar idea.
Yeah.
If we were to use the rungs as like, we could use it as a clothes horse.
Okay.
But we could make it so it's one of the pulley ones.
Oh, the ones that go to the ceiling?
Yeah, yeah.
The old-fashioned ones?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I think that'd be nice to keep, keep the character it's got. Obviously, give it a bit of a spruce up.
Yeah.
Good coat finish.
You going to buy some pulleys or anything like that?
Or we could make some wooden ones.
Listen, I'm loving the ideas, but what I'm not hearing is a budget. I need to hear a price.
I reckon it's got to be around the 250. Yeah, why don't we say 250?
250?
Yeah. 250. Listen, I'm loving that idea. All right, as soon as they're finished, let me know. I'll come and pick them up. Cool. Cheers. Take care.
See you later.
I'm quite excited about this one.
Yeah, me too,
It's
actually.
going to be good. Especially making the pulleys, and that's going to be fun. I think it'll be nice. It's got a lot of character in it, and I think it's going to be quite a useful product by the end of it.
Now, this is why I came to Josh and Ollie. I wanted creativity, and they definitely delivered. They're going to use those ladders in a completely different way. But what I'm really looking forward to is those hand-turned pulleys. Can't wait to see them.
It'll be £250 to turn the ladders into a clothes horse. But can Josh and Ollie pulley it off? Or will the ladders be hung out to dry? With one item under his belt, Jay's on the hunt for 3 more.
All right, mate, back up. There we go. No?
Never mind, can't win them all. Ian's arrived. Will Jay's luck change when he sees what he's chucking out?
That's nice. How are we doing, sir?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
I'm Jay.
Hello.
You are?
Yeah, I'm Ian.
All right, Ian. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hold on, let's get this out. I didn't know it was that long. I thought it was only a small bit.
No, it's...
What is this?
It's a thing for putting plants in, window box.
Oh, I'm with you. So, hold on, where'd you buy this from then?
My father made it.
Wow. So he made this from scratch?
Yep.
Like, just welded this together for you? Impressive. Proper impressive. So how long have you had this then?
Well, we moved into the house 40 years ago, and
Right.
it was probably a couple of years after when we decided to have the house, so 38 years.
I think it's beautiful. I really like it. And why are you getting rid of them?
Well, I've painted them a number of times, they're rusty, and
Yeah.
my dear wife said, I think we should have a change.
If it's all right with you, can I have this?
Of course you can.
Yeah? Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. If I'm able to do something with Ian, I'll let you know and I'll get back to you. Is that all right?
Of course it is.
Thank you, Ian.
Jay's rescued a rusty-looking window box, handmade by Ian's father. So, Ian, are you excited to see what becomes of it?
It's to be fantastic to see it again and to see what is done with it, whatever it is. It's, the fact that it's going to be used for something, I think is terrific.
Now, it's not every day you come across a bespoke window flower box, and one, as heavy as that. Yes, there's a bit of rust, but the material on this is still good. The ideas are flowing, and I think this is a good find.
So, who does Jay have in mind to make the most of this heavy metal? Kev Paxton is a traditional blacksmith with a flair for the artistic. He transforms old scrap into furniture and sculptures.
I really like, upcycling. The society we live in now is throw away, discard it, buy something new. And to look at something and be able to just, turn it around, like, from, the fallen acorn, the mighty oak grows, it's the same with, upcycling. I'm quite happy to upcycle and give it a second or a third chance in life.
Jay shipped the metal window box to brilliant blacksmith Kev. It hasn't seen any flowers for years. But has it planted any seeds of inspiration for you, Kev?
It's pretty interesting. It's old school blacksmithing at best. So it's going to be interesting to see what Jay's thoughts are on this one. Hey Jay, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
Good, can't complain at all. A wee bit cold, but apart from that, all good.
Make sure you keep warm up there. So tell me, did you receive the window box I sent up to you?
Yeah, window box, I thought it was that. Can you look that way? Yeah, it's arrived.
Well, what I thought is to spend a lot of time outside, so we could do with bringing it inside and turn it into table. Maybe a coffee table or a dining table.
Don't know about a dining table. I don't think there's enough metal. What about, like, a bedside table or something, or a console table? It would probably be enough to do something along their lines.
Cool, yeah. bedside table could work. Do you think you can make a pair of them?
If I get my thinking cap on, I could maybe make a pair.
Well, I'm feeling lucky, so do your best and make me 2. But what kind of costs are we looking at?
If it's a pair then, what about 600 for the pair?
300 each.
Is that cool?
Well, I'm happy with that.
All right. That's pressure then, so it's got to be 2 now.
Well, you're committed to that now, aren't you, mate? All right. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
No worries, Jay. Cheers, mate. See you soon. Bye-bye. So Jay seemed quite happy with what I said. He pushed his luck with a dining table, but I don't think there's enough material, so it was going to be a bit of fun in this one. It's going to be old school, take me back a few years blacksmithing work. So the thing I've got in my head will be, I think if it works out, it'll be pretty cool, but wish me luck.
Good luck, sir. You might need it. It'll be £600 for Kev to try and turn the window box into a pair of bedside tables. But with such limited metal to work with, has he overpromised on what he can deliver? Down in West Sussex, Josh and Ollie are strategising over the step ladders they promised Jay they'd turn into a clothes pulley.
The rough plan for this is to cut the main bulk of it out, take any sort of sharp edges off, just clean it up a little bit because it's got some nice character at the moment, but I feel like if people are going to hang their clothes on it, then it needs to be at least a certain level of finish to it.
You're quite right, Josh. Nobody wants splinters in their smalls. So, to start pulleying this project together, Josh is sawing off the excess part of the ladders with a Japanese handsaw. With the piece they need cut to size, what's the next rung on this renovation?
2 wheels on this one, 1 wheel on this one. The rope comes here, down, hook, up, over, another hook. Ladder.
It's like a crude plan to rob a bank or something.
Look out, it's the Bonnie and Clyde of carpentry. And for this heist, they're going to need some wheels.
We're going to try and use these old balls that we've got. So they're made from lignum vitae, which is like a really dense timber. They always used to make pulleys and hardwaring things like that out of it. So it's probably pretty perfect for this.
So it's off to the lathe, where Josh is using a gouge to turn the bowl into the start of some pulley wheels. Hang on, where's Ollie gone?
While Josh is making the wheels for the pulleys, I'm going to make the little holder that holds the wheels in place.
Ollie's opting for oak to tie in with the light wood of the ladder, while Josh's lignum vitae pulley wheels are beginning to look the part. Now they're carved, Josh is drilling a central hole with a drill bit on the lathe and cutting them into individual wheels. How's it looking, Josh?
I think that's about right. Never made a pulley before, I've got no idea.
On the back of that astounding confidence, Ollie is cutting his oak pieces with a domino jointer to create the housing for the pulley wheels, while Josh gets to work on the main event.
I think it would be nice to keep some of the paint, because I mean, just looking at that edge, that's really cool, and that's like the history of the ladder. It's just about keeping enough character for it still to look aged, but then also to be practical as well.
To try and strike that delicate balance, Josh is sanding off any splinters that might get stuck in clothing before using a scouring attachment to remove any surface grime and not all the lovely character details they want to retain. Now all that's left to do is rounding off the pulley casings on Ollie's homemade belt grinder. Yes, you heard it, homemade. What could possibly go wrong?
Computer says no.
Got an IT problem?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
You tried turning it off and on again. That's no good, mate.
If If I can just get it going, I've just got 2 more to finish.
If the lads can't fix their belt grinder bugs, they'll have nothing to show Jay. Best give IT a ring, Ollie. While Josh and Ollie tinker with their IT troubles, Kev's got some Windows issues of his own. The fact he's promised Jay 2 bedside tables from just 1 window box.
Because there's not a lot of material, I've got this sort of idea, like maybe a bandstand, if I'm right. I'm thinking, you know, you just go into some parks and there was old Victorian-style bandstands. I think that's what it was. Sort of big overthrow thing. Rework these scrolls that are on it. Yeah, that might work.
2 bandstand-style bedside tables. That'll be music to Jay's ears. Certainly better than the sound of an angle grinder, which Kev is using to weaken the welds before hammering the metal scrolls out with a chisel.
Sometimes old-fashioned tools are the best.
It certainly seems to be doing the job.
So that's all the scrolls sorted out. They're very light, but we can rework them into something nicer, I hope.
Kev's firing up the furnace to get his metal malleable. But what are you going to do with it, Kev?
I generally would